yeah, I'll buy that. What about him?
Him? He's harmless. Back in the 60s, he was part of the free speech movement at Berkeley. I think he did a little too much LDS.
LDS?
This is Infants on Thrones, the philosophies of men mingled with humor. We are the Quorum.
Welcome back to Infants on Thrones. I'm Glenn Ostland, and this is episode 571, From LDS to LSD, Consciousness, Psychedelics, and the Meaning of Life with Micah Nickolaisen. It's a long title. And you know what? Come to think about it, I don't think we even talk about LSD at all in this episode, but, you know, LDS, LSD, the Star Trek thing, whatever. We talk about a bunch of stuff in this informal continuation of the even more informal series on the meaning of life, and let's just get right to it right now. Here we go. Hi, Micah. So I sent you the link to that Meaning of Life episode that I recorded with Matt and Colton and Brad. He was my mission companion, Brad.
Mm-hmm.
And did you listen to the full thing, or did you just listen to the intro?
I think I caught like the first 20, 30 minutes of it.
So you heard
part of the conversation. Yeah.
So you heard the email from the listener that we were responding to that was, you know, he was saying, look, I left the church a couple of years ago, but I'm still kind of looking for something, and I've had a hard life and been thinking about the meaning of life. I'd like to hear you guys talk about it, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the inspiration for this whole thing that I thought would be kind of a cool series. So I've recorded one with Brady Bloom. I'm recording another one tomorrow. There'll be a bunch of like meaning of life episodes eventually. So this one will be the meaning of life with Micah Nickolaisen.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Yeah. Okay.
Well,
Let's do
dude,
that.
Don't short sell yourself. All right. I know you love having these kinds of conversations, and the last time you were on Infants on Thrones was the episode where we had Bryce Blakenagel, and we were talking about Joseph Smith and entheogens. If I remember right, I think that was the last one that you were on.
Yeah, I think that was the last one I did with you guys.
Yeah,
that was a while ago. It
was a while. Yeah, it was a year ago. I think October or September. So yeah, it's been well over a year. But you had some admissions and some acknowledgments in that episode about medicinal spiritual practices, and if those haven't contributed to your sense of meaning of life, I'll be very, very surprised.
Well, your suspicions may be correct a little bit. Yeah.
How about we just start kind of like the whole background, you know, introduce yourself to listeners who may not have once upon a time been members of the Micah Nickolaisen Thoughtful Faith fan club, although I'm pretty sure most everybody was.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I think most people these days have no idea who I am, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if anybody recognizes who I am, it's probably from when I used to podcast for Open Stories. I was the original host of the Thoughtful Faith podcast from I only did it for a year. So I think it was like summer of 2012 to the spring of 2013. And
you know, 2012 still doesn't seem like it was that long ago to me, but I'm like, yeah, that was like 7 years ago.
Yeah, it's a while back.
Crazy.
Yeah. It is weird to realize that.
Yeah.
But then, and then probably the only other thing is the any opposed demonstration.
Oh, you did that with Scott, right?
And 2015, yeah, with Scott.
And so, who was the other guy that did that with you?
Don
Brager. Yeah.
So yeah, we were the assholes that trolled the Mormon Church in conference. Oh, that's right. We can't say Mormon Church anymore, huh? Okay.
No, we can. Well, actually, no. You're right. They have decided that they want to be known as the ex-Mormon Church.
The church formerly known as the Mormon Church.
Right. Yes. Yeah. The ex-Mormons. That's what it says on the TV
silly
commercials now. The ex-Mormons.
Oh, Russ Nelson.
Yeah.
Billy Rascal. Find some real stuff to worry about.
So where if I remember right, when you started A Thoughtful Faith, it was kind of like you wanted to stay in. You were like very New Order Mormon, find the value in things. And then at one point you were pushing people to insist that their stake presidents hold a disciplinary council, while also just resigning or something like that. I remember there were like some
that
going
was
on.
a weird year, whatever year that was. I think that was that 2014? I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, it was all, I think.
Were you not doing Thoughtful Faith when that was going on?
No, well, so what happened was, it's not that I was just like a New Order Mormon, like, oh, I can find things that I like about this. I was still a believer, and that's really what kept me in, is that I believed it, you know.
Yeah. Well, New Order Mormons are believers, right?
Not always.
Okay. I don't know. I
you know, you can be a non-believer, like person, right? I don't know. Who cares? Yeah. But so once I stopped believing, I stopped doing the podcast, because I stopped podcasting that perspective, just because, you know, I couldn't really, I mean, I understood it and I think it's valuable, but once I stopped believing, then, you know, I stopped going to church, and, you know, I really kind of, you know, dove past, you know, Christianity. I was identified as like an atheist for a good little while. And then I think shortly after that, me and my friend, Jake Abhow, started that Strangers in Zion project, where it was right after John Dehlin and Kate Kelly got excommunicated. And it was, the message was, hey, if you're going to excommunicate these kind of people for these kind of things, you should just kind of get rid of all of us. Like, if you're going to excommunicate John Dehlin and Kate Kelly, you should excommunicate me and all Mormons like us. And so, we encouraged people to request a disciplinary council. But before that, I started organizing the annual mass resignation in Salt Lake for that year. You know, there's like one every year, right? And so I organized it that year. But then after I started organizing that, Jake and I started that other project. So I was kind of doing both at the same time. And then I think it was the year after that was any opposed.
And this is also pre-CES letter, right? Or
I mean,
do you remember?
CES was 2013. So
okay. Right.
I remember I was running the A Thoughtful Faith Facebook group when Jeremy Runnels was first kind of distributing the original version of it. Yeah. And I remember, and he came and he posted it in A Thoughtful Faith, and I started reading it, and I was like, oh geez, this is like a testimony nuclear bomb.
Right. Yeah.
And I actually asked him to remove his post because of it, because
it wasn't thoughtful or faithful enough.
Yeah, it wasn't it was very thoughtful, but unfortunately not faithful enough. Not that I loved it, but you know, it just wasn't a good fit for that. But that's my first memory of the CES letter.
Yeah, I ask because like when you talk to people that left the church post CES letter, it seems to be kind of a different experience, or maybe that's just me. I think of it as a different experience than pre CES letter, but it's kind of like a watershed mark in the
I think so. Yeah,
post Mormon world.
I wouldn't disagree with that.
Yeah. Now, when you were insisting on having disciplinary councils, did you actually have one? Did you meet with the stake president and go through a disciplinary council?
Yeah, when I requested my disciplinary council, my stake president, whom I was very close with, we were pretty good friends, and I had met with him many, many times over the years leading up to that point. And he met with me and said, yeah, we were kind of going to do it anyway. So,
yeah.
And so,
really?
They held, my disciplinary council was 8 hours long. And, but they disfellowshipped me. They didn't excommunicate me.
Oh, I remember that. And it was kind of like, I remember my response to it was, that was like the biggest FU that they could have given.
Yeah. Yeah. they knew it was the last thing that I wanted, and that's what they gave me.
Right. Oh, jeez.
So
So at that time, like what would you have said was the meaning of life for you when you were an active believing Mormon? What was the whole purpose of all of this living stuff?
to discover the program and follow the program.
No, that's not what you would have said then, right? Is
Sure.
it?
I mean, not in those words. That's like,
That's like jaded, cynical ex-Mormon. Just obey. So, like,
No,
believers don't ever really say it like that, do they?
I really believed in it very strongly, and I measured myself based on how well I was following the program.
Sure.
There's a program.
True. Yeah.
And, I was playing the long game with everything.
But wasn't that just a means to an end? Like the obedience was a means to an end. It was a way to keep yourself safe and protected while you were here to accomplish what you were really supposed to accomplish, which is to.
I'm not even talking about following orders. I'm talking about integrating yourself into a system of life. All right, you're going to have to explain this to me then. Well, the program is for me growing up was you go on a mission,
Yeah.
you get home, you get married, you have kids, you have your career, you make lots of money, and you serve in the church the rest of your life. And then the payoff is that, yeah, you have safety, you have security, you have structure, and you eventually get to become a god and have your own universe. So
Yeah.
I was playing the long game. And that's really what I derived most of my meaning and purpose from.
So how has that shifted now?
It's, asking me what the meaning of life is now is all I can say is, I can tell you what I think today, like
Good.
It's not like there's any kind of conclusion that I've like settled on or anything like that. And it's just been a really wild ride. I mean, like I said, I was, a liberal believer, then I was agnostic, then I was atheist, and then I discovered psychedelics, and now I'm nothing. Like I'm just, I have lots of thoughts and ideas about what the meaning and purpose of life could be, or things like metaphysics, spirituality. But, I'm not hanging my hat on anything anymore.
So certainty is kind of,
certainty's out the window. I mean, for the most part.
And how certain are you of that?
Whatever, Glenn.
I know, no. I recently had this conversation with somebody, and they're like, I'm pretty certain that I just don't put any certainty in anything anymore. And then I like caught myself and I went, what the hell did I just say?
You yeah, it is an absolute, isn't it?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. So you don't have a sense of like what life is all about? Like how you get fulfillment in life?
I know how I do.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that.
Okay. Well, the thing that's just the thing that was crazy for me is like I said, my entire purpose and meaning was all mixed in with Mormonism and everything that came along with that, like my marriage and, the friends that I had and the community that I had, like all that stuff is, tangled up in that root system. And so, just like your listener who emailed you, like when I was listening to that, I was like, oh, I remember those days of just being rudderless on a stormy ocean of uncertainty. And it's really hard because when you're kind of left with nothing, it's really hard to even find anything to anchor onto as even just an intellectual, pivot point to start developing, meaning and purpose. And so for me, there was just a lot of despair and, hopelessness. And eventually for me, I just kind of got really nihilistic about everything and just said, well, I guess just there isn't any meaning and purpose. So there's just nothing to any of it. It's just all happening and that's it. And I still definitely feel that way.
Really? Oh,
Is
you
there-
haven't gotten out of the nihilistic phase.
I mean, I no, I mean, I
As
just
if
think
it's a
nihilism. I just think nihilism is for me, nihilism is a very useful um, model to examine things. Not my nihilism keeps my altruistic idealism in check.
Okay.
Because I'll get myself all worked up about something that I'm passionate about, or a project or a goal, and then if there are problems or it doesn't happen or I fail, at the end of the day, I can say, fuck it, it doesn't matter. And so I like certain aspects of nihilism. I like kind of hanging on to some of that. But, I was pretty much convinced that, well, I mean, that's the thing is like, I'm still very much a materialist, but I just think there's more to a lot of it than I originally realized. And discovering that I can attribute a lot of that to, the plant medicines and the plants are just a tool to get to transcendent mystical experiences. And that sounds really like, kind of esoteric, I think, to at least most of the people I hang out with. But
What do you mean esoteric?
like just kind of ancient woo-woo, I think of like, fake gurus and, just quackery so I don't have the right words for it, but our minds, are labyrinthian in their complexity, right?
Oh, great word. Labyrinthian. I love it.
That is a great word. I love that word.
Yeah. Our minds are labyrinthian in complexity. Oh, I love it. Yeah.
And there's so many different layers and rooms. It's like a house. There's all these different parts of it. It's like a mansion, it's like this enormous structure that, that we can measure things about it. We can put somebody in an fMRI machine and see what parts of their brain light up. And we can look at the brain on a microscopic level. We can understand how different neural receptors work, but this whole consciousness thing still is incredibly mysterious.
Yeah.
And what I didn't realize is that, the waking consciousness that I have always been told is reality, definitely is, but that is, that's under the reality I'm seeing is under the skin or the lens of of one part of my consciousness. But inside your mind, there are places that you can go and experiences that you can have. And people can do that through Hindu yogic meditation. They can do it through mindfulness meditation. They can do it through athletics. They can do it through near-death experiences. There are so many different paths to access these very fascinating corners of our mind.
Have you read the book Stealing Fire?
I've heard of it, but I haven't read it yet.
There's it's really, really good. And it talks about these states of mind. And I think the word that it uses for it is ecstasis, which is, like a play on ecstasy, but this ecstatic state when people do experience consciousness or they experience reality in a different way. And it starts off by talking about Navy SEALs and how Navy SEALs are trained. And I forget the exact number. It's this insane millions and millions of dollars that are invested in the training of Navy SEALs, but it's so that they can operate together as a group so that any one of them at any given time can become the leader, and they all just kind of shift immediately. And their efficiency is incredible because it's like this mind meld situation that they're in. One of the examples the book gives is the lead guitarist for Maroon 5 who grew up Mormon, which I didn't know. And he explained that when he gets into just the flow of playing the guitar, it was the same thing that he experienced as a Mormon when he would feel the Holy Ghost and he would feel the Spirit. And that was kind of like one of the things that was a crack in his foundation. Like, oh wait, this thing that I've been told is the Holy Ghost the whole time must be something else, must be something different. But yeah, I think you'd like that book. It sounds like that's what you're describing, this state of ecstasis. At least the way they define
that sounds
it
right.
Yeah.
I mean, and for me, psychedelics have kind of been my way of having those mystical experiences. And these plants get categorized as hallucinogens, which they technically are, but and I've people I've talked to about this to say, oh, I'm not interested in hallucinations, and it's like, that's really not the right word. The right word is, these are visions that you have. Now, I don't know where all of this comes from, just like I don't know where my consciousness comes from. Does it just live in the tissue of this organ sitting in my cranium, or is there something more to consciousness? Is there parts of the universe that we just don't understand yet? I don't know, but
yeah, duh.
I don't really care where it comes from.
Right.
I don't really care. Yeah, exactly. Of course we don't understand it. We don't.
Right.
We especially when you're talking about the mind, like, we still have so much that we don't. It's like what that Rumsfeld quote: "There are no knowns and unknown knowns," or whatever. Anyway, we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah. Right.
And and so anyway, I think these visionary experiences have really helped me kind of develop the meaning and purpose that I derive from life.
Well, I know I didn't prepare you for any of this, but as I'm listening to you talk, Micah, I think what I'd like to do eventually, I think I think I'd like to work my way to talk about these different medicines that you're talking about, plant medicines or whatever. We could talk specifically about those, some of the visions or experiences or insights that you've had with them. But before we get there, there's two things that you said that I'd really like to spend some time talking about. And one is just trying to understand what consciousness is, or what you mean when you're talking about consciousness. And I'm under no delusions that we're going to crack this nut and have the right answer in our conversation. We're just having fun exploring, the way you see things, the way that I see things, and then our listeners can compare that against the way that they see things. But so I want to talk about consciousness. And then this idea that you said something earlier about how our waking reality isn't, like, it is real, but it isn't the entirety of reality. It's a portion of that. So I kind of want to explore those two ideas, and then talk more specifically about some of these medicines. So let's start with consciousness.
Okay.
What do you mean when you say consciousness? What does that even? What is it?
So, I guess, see, I don't even know. I don't know. Like, the problem is that language really doesn't do a good job. It's not super helpful when you talk about these concepts, I don't think. And so the only way you can really understand any of these concepts is to experience them, to experience different states of consciousness. But
everybody right now who's listening to this is experiencing a state of consciousness.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And that is, especially in our Western society, that is like the functional consciousness. That is the you. That is I. Like, me talking to you right now in my current state of mind, this is the real Micah talking to you right now.
The real Micah.
And any deviation from that is an altered state of consciousness, right? And so I don't even know what the right terms are for half of these things. Like, different books call it different things, but I'm just going to call it waking consciousness. But the functional and people experience altered states, very often. That's what a dream is. A dream is an altered state of consciousness. So you leave your waking consciousness and go into a different angle or facet or room.
How about the word awareness? Like you can the word awareness be a synonym for consciousness, or is there more to consciousness than you get just in the word awareness?
That's a good question, because I think maybe it's helpful to kind of compare what we think of as aware, because for example, if I look at a dog and I imagine what kind of consciousness that dog has versus what I experience, I imagine that word awareness is a part of that difference. Like, I was actually talking to somebody about this last night, how one of the things that makes humans so unique is that as far as I can tell, most species are just running a program, right? Like, a dog isn't really thinking very much about, the fact that it's a dog, or questions why it does the things that it does. It just runs the dog program. And humans, we run the human program, but what's weird about us is we can actually look under the hood and look at the program now.
Yeah.
And we can see how it works a little bit and start to understand it. And so that kind of awareness, I think just by its nature makes it a different kind of consciousness than what other species have.
I heard it one. I don't remember where this was. It might have been like an Alan Watts thing. It could have been just a conversation I was having with somebody once, but they were talking about that difference. I think even using the example of a dog or animals, that it's clear that they're aware of things because they're responding to stimuli in the environment.
And they feel compassion, they feel love,
Sure.
they feel joy, they feel pain, they feel fear, So there's so much overlap, but
the question is, are they aware that they're aware? And that's maybe the line of of humans being able to look under the hood, as the words that you used for it, but that we can think about thinking. We can be aware about being aware.
And we can observe our own thoughts.
Yeah, we can observe our observations of observing our thoughts and get into this really meta realm, and also to the point where we're able to kind of recreate that. I know there's the questions about, are we ever going to be able to recreate human consciousness for artificial intelligence? And some people say, yeah, it's close. And other people say, yeah, it's far away, or no, it'll never happen. It's too complex.
No, it'll happen.
Of course it'll happen. It's already happened.
Yeah, it's
already happened somewhere in this
place
universe.
Bets on how long, but it is going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what do you think the probability is that it has already happened somewhere in this universe?
Where an organic life form created a electronic life form?
Sure.
I don't know.
That consciousness.
Like developing. So here, okay. Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, if you think about, I mean, I've spent some time thinking about this, that how many trillions of stars are there, solar systems and planets, and there's got to be more than a handful of Earth-type planets. And we don't even know if there's non-carbon-based forms of life out there. We haven't discovered any that I'm aware of. I don't know. Maybe we have. Maybe somebody would come to me and say, oh, we actually have. But where life goes through this process of evolution to the point where, we can look at ourselves and go, all right, we can separate ourselves from the animals because we know that we think that we think. We're aware that we're aware. We've attained that level of consciousness. But there are additional, more advanced levels of consciousness that artificial intelligence would be able to reach that we can't even comprehend at this point. What are the probability? What's the percentage probability that has already happened at some other place in the universe where life has evolved similar to here, but with different environments? And to me, I think it's more probable than not. I give it more than a 50% chance. I mean, that's just my gut feeling.
Yeah, I couldn't even venture a guess, to be honest with you. I have no idea.
Yeah.
That's a better question for like Neil deGrasse Tyson than
me. Whatever. I'm not. Oh, maybe if I'm looking for the right answer, I'm just more interested in what you think.
Well, here's something I want to kind of the thing that I find interesting to think about with consciousness is that if you listen to the language that we're using, like awareness and things like that, we put this hierarchy on consciousness, and we always have, where you've got humans at the top and of the consciousness of the awareness spectrum, right? And then up until recently it was like really men at the top, then women, and then white dudes in particular, all that stuff.
Yeah,
right? And then you've got animals, and then plants, and then rocks. There's this like hierarchy, but I just really wonder if that's even the right way to look at it. I wonder if what we perceive as more awareness or superiority is us just kind of projecting our own narcissism on what consciousness is, because the fact that with all the technology that we have, with all of the radiology equipment and techniques that we have, we still don't know what the mind is and what consciousness is. And we can look at the tissue of the brain and we can pick it apart and dissect it, and we still don't know it. So how do we know that a plant doesn't have something like this?
Sure.
How do we know that, things that we have always perceived as, soulless, mindless things that are here really for our benefit, but we really just have no idea, what consciousness is and what can have it and what can't, and what it's even like, like let's just suspend our disbelief and pretend that something like a tree has some sort of sentience or consciousness. It probably wouldn't be anything remotely similar to what we would recognize as consciousness, but that doesn't make it
not be
or that doesn't make
hasty. Did you catch that? I was saying, let's not be hasty, young hobbit.
Yeah, I get the ents.
The ents, yeah. Like that Tolkien was exploring this idea. What would it be like if trees walk and talk?
I want to know what Tolkien was smoking besides tobacco. That's what I want to know.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you don't think that it was Shire Leaf?
Yeah, Shire Leaf.
Shire Leaf.
Shire Leaf.
So what about words like intelligence? Like where would intelligence fit in the consciousness or awareness spectrum of things in the way
I would say intelligence is maybe like, okay, so imagine I'm just spitballing here. Imagine consciousness is like a modular system, like a system that can have a lot of different components that you can stick together. So like humans, one of those modular components is intelligence, right? Like that's a part of human consciousness is some level of intellect. Now, what does that word mean? I don't know, man. Like, I don't know. What does the word intelligence mean?
Yeah, I don't. Is it the ability to remember things really good? Really good? You got good intelligence, to figure things out. I mean, you got a quick processor in that organic computer.
I guess I would just say the things they test for in an IQ test. That's what intelligence is.
Yeah.
Puzzles, decision making.
What about a strand of DNA?
What about it?
Yeah, because a strand of DNA contains all of this genetic information. Is that intelligence? It's like a library. It's like a data chip that's just got all this dormant information stored in it. That when I saw this video recently that was really interesting. It was talking about the way that cells interact with the environment around them. And it's kind of like a binary thing, like yeses or nos, and they've got certain things that will either fit through the membrane or they won't fit through the membrane, like the shape of molecules and things. And when something bumps up against the membrane of the cell has a way of communicating to the nucleus and to all of the genetic information that's stored inside of the nucleus, how to respond to that thing that's bumping up against it on the outside of it, and it will. Yeah, it's reacting at least. I mean, so there's the question: is it just a dumb mechanic response to thing that has evolved over hundreds and thousands of years with this repetitive pattern that if X then Y, kind of thing? Going back to my DOS days when I was like 11 years old, learning DOS in summer school. DOS. If X then Y, but it's so interesting to think about those processes that are constantly going on, even within our own bodies that we're not aware of. And that information that's stored really densely packed in the nucleus of every cell that we have. I think I'm on the right track with this.
And this is why I love Westworld so much.
Oh, Westworld.
Even though its execution is sometimes
yeah,
I love everything that they're trying to explore.
Yeah, right.
And the thing that I love about Westworld is it's kind of the on its face premise is, robots, artificial intelligence, and the distinction that the human creators robots between themselves and their creations, and how they're just machines running programs. But the human creators,
do they have agency? Do they have free will?
Well, I think one of the questions that Westworld wants you to ask is, what's the difference between them and us at the end of the day? Because the human creators, like Dr. Ford, Anthony Hopkins' character, he knows every moving little part, every little piece of code. He can break down these machines into its most, basic fundamental parts. He knows it. But obviously the machine is more than the sum of its parts, right? And these machines are experiencing consciousness. It may not be the exact same. Of course it's going to be different because they're a different thing,
Mm-hmm.
but our
I'm so glad you brought up Westworld. I hadn't even thought about going Westworld on this.
Westworld is all about this whole exploration of what consciousness is.
It really is. And that little figure at the center of the maze in season 1 that, spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't watched Westworld but wants to, just shut this off now because we're just going to talk. But it's Dolores. She is the voice that she's been hearing. She's been picturing that it's Ford, or was it Bernard, or whatever that was. But it turns out it was really her. She was hearing her own voice, and she was the one that was dictating the things that she was doing. And that was kind of like waking up, or enlightenment, or the equivalent of that for this android. Or are they considered androids? I don't know what they're considered.
Probably.
Yeah.
Well,
so do you think there's an equivalent to that, or is that just a metaphor?
I just think I don't think it really answers any questions. I think it's teaching us with the question. The question is, what is the difference between these humans and these androids?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the show, one of the things it wants you to wrestle with and really think about and contemplate. And so instead of talking about an android, let's talk about a dog or a cow. Like their consciousness is different, or a plant. I'm just saying, and really what I was kind of trying to circle back to was your question about, does something like DNA have intelligence?
Mm-hmm.
Does it have consciousness? And the thing that has really dawned on me lately, and actually a lot of this is going to be kind of echoing what Matt talked about when he was talking about this. And because he gave me this book to read called Climate, A New Story.
Mm.
Were you and I talking about this? Anyway, I like what
this is about, like the kind of the Gaia theory.
Yes.
Kind of stuff? Okay.
I really like, I think it's an Alan Watts quote where he says, you are something that the whole world is doing.
Sure. Yeah.
And just like waves on a sea, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's made up of individual ripples and waves, but that's not how you think about it.
Yeah.
And, so let's look at our things like DNA, or let's look at like the bacteria that live in our gut, or let's look at, just all the little parts of us that make us, that coalesce into this organism, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's really no separation between us and our DNA, like it's all one thing, just like this world is all one thing and we're a part of it, just like, the DNA molecules and the bacteria are a part of us. And so for me, it's hard to distinguish where, this sense of me, this waking consciousness, my understanding of who I am begins, and all that other stuff that makes me up ends, And so
but all that stuff exists outside of your waking consciousness, right? Like you're not aware of every individual bacteria that's in your gut.
True.
What it's doing.
Yeah.
But it's there.
But it's there, and it's happening, and it is influencing that waking consciousness, all of that stuff.
Right.
That's all.
Influencing and informing and being influenced by and being informed by,
and
like this give and take with things that you do.
Right. And so our body is doing that to our consciousness. We are deciding what goes into our body. We are deciding what happens to our body. but sometimes we don't. And so it's not just about what's happening inside our body, it's what's happening in the world around us. Things like trauma are going to affect our waking consciousness. Yeah. And so we're all, like bumping into each other, whether it's plants and animals and humans, everything is alive on this planet and everything is happening. And the reason I like that book, I never understood this concept of the separation myth. And that's what he's trying to debunk in this book, is the kind of the Western separation myth that we are separate things.
Right. Yeah.
That I can hurt you without it affecting me.
Sure.
That I can take oil from the planet and shoot it into the sky, and that's not going to affect me. I can reroute rivers. I can till up land. I can hurt my body, or I can hurt an animal, or without it ultimately affecting you. And, this planet, as far as I'm concerned, is the only God that we're ever going to have. And just as much as we are more than the sum of our parts, I think this planet is too. And for all we know, the planet has some kind of intelligence. And which, by the way, all of this stuff is very Mormon.
Yeah.
It's very like deep doctrine, Cleon Skousen, like Pratt Brothers stuff.
That's what it was. So I was talking with somebody today about Cleon Skousen, and I'm like, I was talking with somebody recently. I couldn't remember. It was you.
Me.
It was me.
It was when we were when we were getting beer.
Yeah. Tell our listeners and remind me about these Cleon Skousen doctrines.
Well, actually, what kind of got me on this tangent, or this kind of line of thought, was I was listening to Sam Harris on the Russell Brand podcast.
Okay.
And they were talking about consciousness, just like we are. And Sam Harris.
No, we're doing it way better than they did.
Of course. I mean, yeah, Sam Harris.
But we are, though. We really are, though. No, but we really are, though. That was a horrible conversation. They couldn't agree on anything. They were talking.
Yeah, that was
a terrible conversation.
Two different languages for sure.
Yeah.
And I think Sam was trying, and I think when he said this, he was trying to like meet Russell on his level, but and so, he was talking about a lot of the same things, like that we don't know where consciousness comes from.
Yeah.
Maybe it's all just neurons firing and brain matter and tissue and electricity and fat and, just chemistry, right? That could be what all there is to consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
But then he said this other thing. He's like, or who knows, maybe consciousness just naturally arises with, increasingly more complicated systems, with the organization of molecules and matter. And I was just like, whoa, what?
Yeah.
Sam Harris just said that? Like, that is really kind of out there, I thought. And then I just had this epiphany. I'm like, oh, that's just like that deep doctrine, Cleon Skousen stuff I would read on my mission about how, when Lehi in the Book of Mormon was talking about how there are two things, that which acts and that's that which is acted upon, that what he's actually talking about is ancient wisdom and ancient doctrine, which is that everything in the universe is made up of either eternal intelligences or eternal elements. And things can't get organized until an intelligence pairs with an element and creates a bond. And it's then at that point that it can be commanded by God, right? And that the reason the intelligences obey God and organize as he desires is because of the perfect virtue that God is, and their love and devotion for him. So that's how God was able to organize unorganized matter. It was because he influenced and persuaded these intelligences, right?
I remember Rock Waterman talking about this way back in the day. It might have been John Larson interviewed him for Mormon Expression, or it could have been John DeLynn for Mormon Stories. It was one of the two. And Rock Waterman was saying that the reason that the elements obey God is because they love him and they're making a choice to do it.
Yep. And the really weird kind of dark side of that whole, because I actually think I really love that. It's still something I love talking about and kind of nerding out about, is some of that that bizarre, like, deep Mormon doctrine.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
And but the kind of the darker side of that doctrine is that what it tries to do is answer the question of what exactly demands this immense amount of justice that Jesus has to satisfy somehow, right? And
Yeah.
what Cleon Skousen said is, and this is like, he claimed to get this from John A. Widstow, I think, who got it from, the Pratts, who got it from Joseph Smith. Anyway, I can't remember like the lineage of these ideas, but, it's not God that's demanding justice for our sins. It's actually the intelligences. Because
it's the elements themselves.
It's the intelligences, and these are lesser intelligences. This goes back to our whole hierarchy thing. Like we are the superior intelligences. We are the noble and great ones, right? And the lesser intelligences, like the intelligence that's a tree, or a dog, or a rock, they have a ceiling on their progression. They can't become like the gods, but we are, because we're special. And so it's so with great power comes great responsibility. And so it's simply unjust and unfair that with this enormous opportunity to become like our creator, that we mess up and stray from that perfection. It's just not fair to give us a pass, because it's such an enormous opportunity, and it wouldn't be fair to these lesser intelligences if those sins were overlooked. And so some kind of justice needs to be given, and apparently it is Jehovah, because they love him. They love him so much that they are willing, basically, like, I don't know what the right term for it is. They basically, they're doing Jesus a solid.
Yeah.
Essentially,
that's
accepting
just like
his sacrifice.
Twisted pretzel logic on a stick with like nacho cheese dripped all over it. It's just delicious.
I
love it.
It is delicious. And it's like I think it's a great Christian philosophy and perspective. I like it.
I think of it more as like a artistic expression almost. Like great science fiction that is believed, with a lot of devotion, but it's still just trying to answer these questions in ways that for whatever reason make sense to them in that place and time, and with all the information they've been given, and this is how they express something to make sense for them. And yeah, I really like that. I wondered, as you were talking about the lesser intelligences, like the trees and the rocks that have a ceiling on their progression, I know that there was a doctrine of multiple mortal probations, but I haven't, I don't know that much about it. And I'm wondering if you add, which is basically reincarnation, right? The multiple,
it's Mormon reincarnation. Yeah.
To this other thing, would that mean that the lesser intelligences are also on the path of eternal progression? And
you would think so, but I mean, it seemed like Skousen was pretty convinced that they had ceilings for whatever reason. That I guess eternity isn't a long enough time for them to
ceilings with a C, not ceilings with an S. That's done in the temple.
Yes, yeah, a cap,
a cap. Yeah. Speaking of caps.
Yeah, I'm listening.
I don't know if we're ready to transition into the plant medicine yet, but doing it on the word cap would have been a great place to do it if it works. But so I want to talk about consciousness. What was the other thing I said I wanted to talk about? Is the
I think we
kind of touched on both of them. With consciousness. When we were having that beer the other day, did I mention to you Stuart Hameroff, the anesthesiologist down at the University of Arizona? Done a bunch of these?
That doesn't sound familiar. From
he gets a lot of shit, and probably rightly so. I don't know. He was one of the producers of the "What the Bleep Do We Know" video, but he holds a consciousness conference every year. And it's started getting more and more legit scientists attending it and kind of opening up. He worked with somebody whose last name was Penrose. Maybe it was Charles Penrose, who's a really well-respected mathematician. And the two of them came up with some kind of a theory that consciousness, and I don't remember all the details of this, but consciousness somehow arises within each individual neuron
through this thing called a microtubule. And microtubules, like there's tons of these microtubules inside of each neuron, and they are self-governing, self-building, they will like, the microtubules are responsible for mitosis when cells split. It's because these microtubules start moving. I picture, like, have you seen the movie Big Hero 6 with the little nanobots?
It's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah, like those, like that's what I was picturing the whole time I was reading this thing about microtubules inside of the neurons. And I still don't know quite how all of those pieces come together to form consciousness or awareness in the way that we're talking about. I think Stuart Hameroff, he tries to get away from the metaphysical woo stuff, but I don't think he can really avoid it. And the suggestion has been made that the awareness bubbles up through, from like really, really deep atomic, subatomic vibrations where there is actual consciousness and intelligence, similar to maybe what I was talking about earlier about the genetic information that's stored in a nucleus, but that it's being communicated, and it comes up through the microtubules in the neurons. And so that when the neurons are moving around and firing, it's not a random thing. They're kind of being steered from within. I don't know. It's interesting stuff.
That's crazy.
Anybody's interested
I've
in
never
these
heard about any of that stuff. That is
Stuart Hameroff.
So yeah, I mean, we keep pulling on that string now, we keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. And it just seems like the deeper we get, the less we understand almost.
You're pulling on the string theory.
Oh, I see what you did there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have a very, pedestrian, fluency and literacy with any of this stuff. So
stop berating yourself, Micah.
No, I know a lot of people who can talk about stuff like this, and I can hang, but it's like, I don't know. You're
bringing new stuff to the conversation. That's awesome.
Okay, I'll take your word for it.
Take my word for it.
I mean, and I don't think I have anything really original that I don't have much that I've come up with on my own, but, I've read a lot of books, and I have a lot of smart people in my life, and so, I sort of have an amalgamation of opinions and things that I believe, but I don't even really remember where half the stuff comes from anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And that doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me either.
Doesn't matter to me. So let's take it then into the caps, into the psychedelics. What are the plant medicines? What are the different plant medicines? Maybe you can like list them out, and then we can talk about each one individually. And
well, so if you want to talk about like kind of raw whole plants that can elicit
altered state of consciousness,
altered states, visionary experiences, psychedelic experiences. Obviously, the one that most people know are mushrooms, psilocybe mushrooms.
Are you just going to skip over marijuana completely? That's not you don't.
No, marijuana. I mean,
a gateway plant medicine.
I'm just starting with mushrooms.
Okay,
we can talk about cannabis. I mean, cannabis. The thing about cannabis is it really, and this is just my opinion, it really only becomes psychedelic when it's done through edibles. Usually,
right? Yeah.
Like if you're inhaling it and getting it right into your blood through your lungs,
right?
Then you're really not going to have. I mean, maybe if it's like you did a lot, like really early on, and some people have that, but I think. Some people will classify cannabis as a psychedelic, or at least a mild psychedelic. Mm-hmm. But I'd say that only applies when it's being done like as hashish, or if it's, edible.
What is hashish?
Hashish is where and I might be wrong about this, it's where they take the fresh bud, and then they just squeeze all of the resin out of it.
Okay.
And that's hashish.
And then how do you smoke hashish? Is that what you do like in a hookah?
No, hookah. I can't. Hookah is just kind of flavored candied tobacco.
Oh,
that's
really?
All, yeah, that's all hookah is. Yeah, it's nicotine. It's a nicotine high.
Okay.
Some people will mix like weed with their hookah and stuff like that. But to be honest with you, I don't know a lot about hashish. I think you can eat it, but that doesn't make sense because it's not decarboxylated. It hasn't been heated up to be converted into.
See, look at you using fancy words like decarboxylated. I don't know what that is, Micah. You need to give yourself more credit here.
Decarboxylate is when you eat marijuana, I'm going to get this backwards. It's THCA, and then heat converts it into THC.
Okay.
So, like, if you're going to make weed brownies, what you have to do first is get a bunch of cannabis, material. A lot of times it's like the trim or the stems or, just the spare stuff. You get that together and you have to heat it in, there's lots of ways you can do it, but you heat it in the oven at 160 degrees for like an hour. And then all the THC.
I bet that smells great.
Yeah, it is. It's very nice.
For the neighbors.
Yeah. The neighbors start asking, well, if they're good neighbors, they'll come over and have some pot brownies.
Okay.
Anyway, then you can, then you extract all the THC from the plant with oil. Then you cook it in oil for a while. Anyway, but when you do that, the THC gets processed in your liver, and then it gets turned into a completely different chemical, which is like 5 times more potent than THC, and that's why edibles are so much stronger than inhaling. So,
the first time I ever did that, Micah, it was a brownie that I ate, and I went like an hour and a half. I didn't feel anything. And so then we smoked, and then I'm like, okay, I can feel that. And then the edible hit. And I swear, I thought, how can anybody function on this? I was so out of it. Like I couldn't remember, I would get up to walk into the kitchen and forget why I had even gotten up or where I had been like 5 seconds earlier. That was my
the first time I got high on cannabis, I was at a big party. And somebody gave me a 170 milligram brownie from a dispensary.
I still don't know, like, with the milligrams, like
for a beginner's tolerance, 10 milligrams is plenty.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I had 170, and it really was not good. And so until the next day, then I felt great, like all the next day. But yeah, that was a rough night. Yeah. And so, but anyway, so yeah, cannabis can definitely, it's definitely a mind altering plant. And medicine.
And the thing that I didn't know, because I didn't do this as a kid. I was a good Mormon.
Yeah, neither did I.
I never drank. I didn't smoke pot. I didn't, do any of that stuff until like in the last, I don't know, recent years, So I was well into my 40s before I tried any of this stuff. And it like, I was surprised by it. It felt like I could feel more. Like food tasted better, obviously, music sounded better. The sensations of cuddling or sex, just all of that just felt, but it
makes everything more vibrant. And
it was strange. It was strange to me that it had that kind of impact. I'm like, okay, I can see now why this is as popular as
I see why people like this.
I see why people like this. Really? You could get a prescription for this kind of stuff? What do I got to do? Nice.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of the experience I had after I tried that. I realized that I had way too much, but the way I felt the next day, I was like, okay, I get this. Yeah. And then I got my card like right away.
And just one more thing I want to say about my experience with it, that I've had a degenerative disc in my lower back since I was probably 19. So I've gone through my entire life with chronic back pain and would be prescribed opioids. Thankfully, I've got a high tolerance or whatever for addiction. So I've never got addicted to the Norco or Loratab or Vicodin or any of these things, Oxycodone, all of these things that I had opioids. Once I got a marijuana prescription, I stopped taking the opioids, and my back pain has been reduced. Like, it's amazing to me. It's just absolutely amazing. So kudos.
Like, I do
Thank you, grandmother cannabis, or whatever its name is.
Well, and that's the thing is, so many of these plants, they are both a mind-altering drug, but they're also a medicinal drug.
Yeah.
You know, cannabis is a perfect example of this miracle plant that where, you know, it's like it has 1,000 different sides to it, and one of them is THC that gets you high.
Sure. Yeah.
You know? And then there's just hundreds and hundreds of other things that are good medicine for all kinds of different things in your body. And I feel that same way about mushrooms too, because there are, you know, so many different like kind of mushroom species that are neuroregenerative, that are good for brain health, good for like the what do they call it? The myelin, the coating around your neurons, you know.
Right. Yeah.
You know, like lion's mane mushrooms are really good for that. I don't know how much psilocybe mushrooms have been examined for that, but
sure.
You know, I just think that a lot of these plants, yeah, they make you feel good and they provide this euphoric high experience, but I also think it's just good medicine and almost good nutrition to have these things at least periodically in your life.
Well, and when you were talking about some of those mushrooms, you're not talking about just like the psychoactive mushrooms, but just like health benefits of the.
Yeah. I'm saying other species of mushrooms, not just psychedelic mushrooms, but, you know, lots of mushrooms have these amazing mental health and kind of neurological benefits. And my suspicion is that these psilocybe mushrooms, in addition to giving you these visionary experiences, are also that it's also providing good medicine for your nervous system. And so I'm
sure you've listened to that Paul Stamets interview with Joe Rogan.
Oh yeah, I love
that. Was mind blowing, man.
Oh yeah,
that was incredible.
Everybody should listen to the Paul Stamets interview on Joe Rogan. He is something else. I met him once.
Oh really?
I went to a psychedelic science conference in Oakland a couple years ago. And I got to meet him. I got to meet Dennis McKenna. I got to meet, now I'm forgetting all their names. I got to meet Roland Griffiths, the guy who's running the Johns Hopkins psilocybin studies.
Oh, cool.
I got to meet, you know, just there's all these like kind of legendary people that are just like on the cutting edge of all of the psychedelic research that's happening right now.
Yeah.
And just great. But anyway,
I heard that who's the guy that founded MAPS? Do you remember?
That's Rick Doblin.
Rick Doblin, yeah. I heard an interview with him. I think it was just this last December, but it may have been a different time. But saying he's working with the FDA on clinical trials for MDMA, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was predicting that within the next 5 years, MDMA will be legal for therapists to use in clinical settings.
Yeah.
That's
Molly.
Awesome.
Ecstasy.
Yeah.
Stuff that Oprah showed on TV that puts holes in your brains. Not really.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I still remember that. I still remember that being on the news when everybody was freaking out about ecstasy at these raves in the 90s. And I remember on TV it showed like a brain scan, and it showed these holes in it. And it's like a completely dishonest image because it looks like it puts holes in the brains, but they're just measuring. It's just an image of particular brain activity in different sections of the brain. There's no holes in the brain. Like the brain's fine. I mean, and MDMA itself is not, you know, I don't believe it's a neurotoxin at all. It's usually when you get other stuff mixed in with your, you know, with in those ecstasy pills, that's what can, you know, cause long-term problems usually.
Yeah.
But right now, MAPS is doing these studies on MDMA. Johns Hopkins is doing kind of parallel research on psilocybin, which is the you know, the psychoactive molecule in the mushrooms.
Right.
And you know, you got guys like Rick Strassman, who he did all that research, I think, in the 90s with DMT.
He's the guy in New Mexico that did the spirit molecule.
Yeah, the spirit molecule guy.
Yeah. Okay.
The thing that's interesting to me about the John, and I don't know if we're even going in any kind of direction you want to, I just like talking about psychedelics, but the thing that's so fascinating to me, I just lost my thought. Never mind. It was something about the Johns Hopkins study. What was it? What was I going to say? The thing that's so fascinating to me about the Johns Hopkins studies is they are basically taking the old experiments that they were doing in the 50s and 60s and just trying to replicate them and doing them better. Mm-hmm. Like this is all research that was going on before. And the thing that's so hard to penetrate with anytime you're talking about these illegal drugs is that we're in this milieu of this idea that there are plants and drugs that are dangerous and that we need to prohibit them and keep them away from people to keep them safe and to keep society safe. And so then we've all been swimming in that for 100 years. It's only been 100 years where it even was like an idea of A, what cannabis even was, and B, that it's dangerous or that these other drugs are dangerous. The idea of dangerous drugs didn't exist until like 100 years ago. And the idea that these things should be prohibited and controlled, that it's a blip in our history. It's a goof. It's a mistake, like this whole paradigm of dangerous drugs is a construct, and it has its roots in racism and in
economic
the state
control.
The state trying to control, and that's not just a wild conspiracy theory. This is all public record now.
Sure.
And so anyway, so we need to get out of that paradigm and understand that these plant medicines like psilocybin or DMT or cannabis or mescaline or there are even likely kind of ancient variants of what we know as LSD today. Like the Greeks did something that
Stealing Fire book talks about it.
Yeah. And so anyway, these plants have always been with us, perhaps from the very beginning,
the stoned ape idea of
the stoned ape hypothesis. I really like that, just like I like the whole idea of the intelligences and the elements, but I don't know how much stock to put in it. But I think it's just like the whole idea of that that Joseph Smith was experimenting with entheogens. Like it's a theory that makes a lot of things make sense, and I think the stoned ape hypothesis is like that too.
Go ahead.
Because we can't explain the million-year leap in like the doubling of our brain cavity or whatever, and like it's just this enormous, quick, rapid growth of the development of our brains and our species, and it's still very mysterious to the anthropologists and everybody else, how all that happened. And so the idea that these kind of ancient monkey people, they're climate changed, and they were in trees, but now all the trees are gone, and there's kind of this grassy savanna, and so they have to learn to be out in the open, and then they stumble upon these mushrooms, they eat them, and that both the mushroom and that animal kind of live together and develop together. Mm-hmm. And cannabis is the same way too. Like cannabis very obviously has been influenced, just like dogs and other animals have been very commingled with our species. And so whatever cannabis was when humans started using it, like it's not the same thing anymore. Like it's a thing that specifically is kind of made for us,
I saw something on YouTube once. I was scanning through documentaries about this sort of thing, and I don't know how much credence to put in this or not, but that there are animals that have been documented that put themselves into altered state of consciousness by doing this very thing.
Most mammals do. Most
Yeah.
mammals, if they can figure out how to have altered states, they will seek them out.
Yeah.
Bears do it. Jaguars, panthers, cats. Like
There were like
you
these
know,
dolphins that would come across some.
yeah, there's like psychedelic fish that the dolphins do, and they pass it around like a joint.
Right. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
real.
Yeah, that's a thing. There's some psychedelic fish that they eat. There's something in it that gets them high, and
I want to see that featured.
and it's part of their and it's part of their bonding. And when you look at pre-agrarian cultures,
it is
that are
part of
still
their
around
bonding.
today,
Yeah.
that's kind of part of.
Yeah.
Like, I honestly think that a big part of being a human is getting together and getting high together.
Mm.
Like, once we invented fire and we could stay up late at night, like, and be safe and protected and warm, like, I just think that became such a part of our development as a species. And I think that these particular plants have been absent for the past 100 years, and I'm not sure that's a good thing.
Well, there's other ways of doing it. There's other ways of achieving it though too. And so even going to sacrament meeting and sitting through that boring meeting and singing and doing stuff, you are repeating these patterns and rhythms, and that repetition and everybody joining in, and that can lead to these states of ecstasy that you call it getting high together, but people getting together to experience something that seems outside of themselves, that's bigger than themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
And, I just think that these plants can kind of grease the wheels for that to happen. Because like I was saying earlier, you don't need drugs to have these experiences. The wonderful analogy that I think Dennis McKenna said is that, if you imagine transcendent mystical experiences as, this land that's at the other side of a river from you, there's lots of different ways that you can cross that river. For example, like, let's say it's a really wide river. Let's say it's like the English Channel. Yeah, you can train for months and years and swim across that river, swim across that channel, and you will get there. But the ferry's $5. And that's kind of how I feel about psychedelics, like.
You're going to have to unpack that for me. I didn't get it.
Okay, so there's all I have to do is eat a plant and I get there.
So what is the ferry is $5? I don't understand what that means.
The ferry to get across the river.
Oh, that it's inexpensive.
Yeah, that it's inexpensive and faster.
Oh, okay. Oh, gotcha. Oh, you could swim or you could take the ferry. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, that was.
It was because I was thinking about the next line of questions. It happens as I'm doing these things.
I do the same.
I don't always pick up on what's being said. It's a failing, Micah. If you're going to beat yourself up, I'm going to beat myself up too. It's a failing of mine. Even after all these podcasts
let us all get together and flog ourselves.
yes, to a state of ecstasy. Because I think that what we've answered the question, what is the meaning of life to Micah Nickolaisen? And it's to get high. And it was before. Maybe. It was before. As a believer in the Mormon Church, you got high on the gospel. I get high on life. You got high on the gospel, and then when that was taken away from you,
I got high on something else.
You get high on something else, and you're like, "Oh wow, this is just a $5 ferry. I'm in."
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, when I discovered psychedelics, it was like a desperate last ditch effort. Because leaving, having the church pulling myself away from the LDS church was. It was, everybody who listens to this podcast understands, what that does to your soul.
Yeah.
But shortly after that, my marriage ended, and that was like 1,000 times worse. And I was on antidepressants and they weren't cutting it. Yeah. And the only reason I would get up in the morning was for my kids every single day. And I actually watched this documentary that you can watch on Amazon Prime called Neurons to Nirvana. And I don't even know why I watched it, but I just started watching this documentary, and this documentary has all of these people from Johns Hopkins, like Roland Griffiths, Dennis McKenna is on it. It's a documentary about psychedelics, specifically from a medicinal kind of clinical perspective. And it kind of teaches, what the roots of the drug war are, and why that happened and why it was a mistake, and so it basically, what that documentary offered to me was a potential solution to my problem.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I still had all of the same negative stigma to something like doing LSD or doing magic mushrooms, it really was just kind of a leap of faith.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that the SSRIs that I was on, that they would, have an impact and inhibit the experience.
Mm.
So I kind of just made this plan where I spent 3 months getting off my meds, and then I was just going to try to have
so
this.
that you could do the mushrooms.
Yeah,
Nice.
so I could just try to give this thing a really good shot, and
Right.
really not having any idea of what it was going to be like, or if it was going to even do anything. I didn't know if it was going to be really scary. I, really just had no idea. But at that point, I just was willing to try anything. And the thing that was so surprising about my first big mushroom trip was I still to this day cannot believe how thoroughly and effectively it healed my mind.
Wow. Just one time?
Just that one time.
Wow.
And I'm not saying that's the only time I've done it. And it's not like the thing about psychedelics is they show you a door. They open the door for you to look at and see what's on the other side of it. Like, this is what it would feel like if you weren't a suicidal mess. This is what it feels like to be fulfilled. This is what it feels like to let go of your hate. But you still have to do all the work, but it shows you the path of what you can do, and it helps you process your trauma. And you have these visionary experiences. When I did my first mushroom trip, I still was just racked with so much pain and anger and hatred from my divorce. And what I expected going into that trip was that I was going to face this monster, this demon, this, malevolent presence in my life. But when I had this trip, not only did the mushroom experience be like, oh, we know exactly what you need. Instead of finding hate and anger and this beast that I had to fight, what I found was an incredible amount of love and compassion. And I had this amazing vision where I basically relived all the highs and all the lows, all the joy, all the pain of my marriage. And it was like a review of all of it. And then I was able to take all of those things and those feelings and process them and let them go into the universe in a very in a very metaphoric presentation.
Yeah.
And and so that's just one of the things that can happen. The other thing that you can have are just these grand theophanies, where you either become God or you meet God. The thing about psychedelics, it showed me like, oh, like when these people talk about these visions where they commune with God and they had like, that's what this is. This is the real thing. This is like the real thing. And so, which also is what opened up my mind to the possibility that maybe Joseph Smith that his visions that he had, his revelations maybe were authentic to some degree, at least in his mind.
Sure.
And, these visionary experiences, they are subjective to you. I don't know if there's a ton. I think there are definitely some objective truths to pull out of a psychedelic experience, but a lot of it is just about you and, facing your demons, but with enough distance from it that it doesn't hurt. And so that's why the MDMA therapy is so promising, because what these therapists can do is they can sit with somebody for 3 hours while the molecules really do all the work. And the people who are participating in this study are people with very severe PTSD, combat veterans, victims of sexual abuse, people who have the worst uncurable PTSD.
Yeah.
They are going through this clinical trial, and I think they do 2 MDMA sessions, right? And then there's just like regular kind of cognitive behavioral therapy in between. And, these people are going through this, like 6-month program, And then when they're taking their exit surveys, when they're going through the same diagnostic checklist and being asked questions, I think the statistic I heard is 65% of the participants no longer qualify as having the diagnosis of PTSD.
Sure. Yeah.
That they're technically being cured of their PTSD because of these drugs. And this is, I think it's great that I think it's important that there are regulations on these things, but at the same time, like if we as, quote unquote Americans, or as people who participate in a Western democratic liberal society, if we believe in values like that we have the freedom to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, then we at the very least must have sovereignty over our own minds and what we do to them, So if I want to eat a mushroom and alter my state of consciousness, that at the very least is the one thing that I should be able to have control and say over, is what I use to alter the very thing that is me. And so, sorry, I'm going off on like a tirade about that, but
no, keep going.
I just don't think that the state has the right to do that in the first place. And we know prohibition doesn't work. It's shocking to me that we didn't learn the lesson from the first half of the 20th century about prohibiting drugs. And so what I really hope is with psychedelics is that we can just slowly break down the stigmas and embrace the role that these visionary experiences have played in our species for as far back as we know or can tell, and use that in our lives. Because I think, and this is all stuff that Matt loves to talk about, how, if you have, if there is dysfunction in your life, like let's say you drink too much, or you eat shitty food, or you're depressed, or you're miserable, or you push away people when they get close to you, or, these are all manifestations of previous traumas, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And, I don't know where I'm getting this opinion from, just from the books I've read, like, Jonathan Haidt and, different psychology books, but, trauma leaves these scars on our souls that result in coping mechanisms. And the real glitch with being a human is that we use things that are self-destructive as coping mechanisms to deal with this trauma. It's so crazy that we do this, but we engage in behavior that is self-destructive in order to treat the pain of our past trauma. And so you can throw pills at that, you can throw people at that, you can throw sex at that. At the end of the day, nothing is going to change and nothing is going to improve until you actually face the trauma. But with some trauma, that is so scary and so painful that, like, it's just too much for most people to face directly.
I think also the world that we live in and the way that we're all connected through technology these days, that we are so worked up in a state of trauma anyway. We're constantly in this fight or flight mode.
Our minds are not made for the world that
we've created.
This isn't,
But I think it's propelling our minds to something else. Obviously, there every time this planet has had some hostile environmental factor, life has evolved to overcome it. Right.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's all going to keep happening.
Yeah.
It's just probably not going to look the same.
Yeah.
But I just think that, sorry, I don't even remember what I was saying before that.
It was a lot.
What were we talking about?
It was a lot. The trauma that people have.
Oh, yeah. So I think that psychedelics are a tool that allow you to face your trauma in an experience that is not just hard and challenging, and it is hard and challenging and painful and exhausting to do this kind of work in a psychedelic experience. But what comes along with that is a level of indescribable bliss and beauty and love and connection that like for me, when I'm trying to specifically, if I'm having the intention of dealing with traumas from my past, it's really hard and it's really painful, but it's also incredibly wonderful. And
let me tell you what I think about that. Just to push pause for a second, Micah, because you mentioned earlier that it's a very subjective experience when people are under the influence of these medicines. And to me, if you're getting the type of fulfillment that life is beautiful and you're filled with love that you're describing, I think that what that means is that that's kind of who you are anyway. And I don't have a lot of experience with people who are doing these things, so I don't really know to be able to make comparisons with other things, but I can imagine that people have different experiences and transform themselves into different kinds of things, but it's more like magnifying what's already inside of them a little bit more.
I would say it magnifies what's inside all of us, really. You know?
But some people are more,
well, and I'm not
more
saying
loving.
that.
Some people are more selfish, more egotistical.
Yeah. Well, I think I will say that I'm not saying that this is a path for everybody.
I was just trying to compliment you. Is all.
Well, thank you. I
was just trying to compliment you that I think that.
Well, what you're saying is true. A lot of it is about what you bring to the table, and your intentions, your state of mind, the mood that you're in when you do it, combined with how much you're doing and where you're doing it. All those things are going to influence the experience. And so yeah, for me, like it's mushrooms are my antidepressant, and it's not like I said, it's not a permanent fix. So yeah, I had this amazing mushroom trip where I processed all my demons and I felt amazing for weeks after, but I didn't really change a lot of my behavior. what I did, I didn't
felt better though.
How I didn't implement any of the lessons that I learned in that experience. So eventually it comes back. And so all I can do is have these experiences, listen to what these experiences are trying to tell me. I have no idea where it comes from. Are these just, are these experiences just arising from the neurons like we were talking about? Or is it also possible that you are, that you're that you're piping in somehow into something bigger? And regardless of where it comes from, it doesn't matter to me. All I know is that the experience itself is incredibly transformative.
See, and this is the thing that I find so interesting about it, because I think that we already are piped into something that's bigger. Like this, I don't know if you heard this on a previous episode or not, but there's this theoretical physicist, David Tong, who I think the YouTube video is like the building blocks of life or something like that. He's giving this lecture out of Oxford or somewhere. I mean, this is like a legit scientist, right? And he's talking about how for so long physicists have been talking about particles, but it's actually waves. And it's actually every single, like if he's talking about an electron, that this little electron that we see, this bundle up unit of energy, it's like fabric that has wrinkled up and bunched up into this one thing. And it's that bunch right there. And that's the electron. But it's part of this field that stretches everywhere. So that the electron, like every single electron in my body, is connected to this electron field that's also connected to the electrons in the microphone that I'm speaking to, in your body, in my computer, like everybody that's listening to this, that we are actually all connected at that level. And that there's, I think like probably they've speculated 24, 28 different, like for every subatomic particle, like a boson or a quark or, like whatever, they are a field of energy.
They're operating on a frequency.
Well, maybe, yeah. I mean, it's a frequency or something, but it's all connected. So, so the thing that I like to speculate with the psychedelics is that this very narrow band of waking consciousness that we talked about earlier in this conversation, the walls of, or I think of it kind of like a partitioned hard drive.
and our brain and our entire nervous system, however far that extends, if it ends at our skin or if it continues, I get kind of crazy there, but that the partitions kind of dissolve, and we have communication with different regions in our brain that don't usually communicate. We become aware of things that maybe we don't have a frame of reference for. We don't really know how to place meaning on it, but it is connecting us. It is making us more aware of the way that we're connected to everything, and that there can be very profound, beautiful epiphanies that arise as a result of that. But I do think that's absolutely true. We are a manifestation. Like you said the thing earlier about we are what the universe is doing right now. If you're going to get really detailed and really pedantic about it, you get down to each atom and each subatomic material and the vibrations that they're making. And it's almost like you've got these trillions of domino, like little domino sets that are like interacting with each other, communicating with each other. And the manifestation of that is us. It's just amazing. And that with the psychedelics, you're somehow able to be a little bit more aware of that. Maybe, I don't know. I like to think of it that way, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I think. That's what I think's going on in those altered states. But there's no way for me to really know for sure. But I do think it's hard for. I mean, I was a very materialist. I was expecting a chemical experience. And
you got one.
And I got one, but what I didn't realize was that it would just complete, because the experience is so incredibly powerful and so ineffable and impossible to understand.
There's that word.
Yeah, that it lacks effing.
Yeah, and to me, this whole materialist dualist dichotomy, I just think it's outdated. I think it's a valuable framework at a certain point, but
I feel like it's just part of the story.
There isn't anything that exists that doesn't exist.
Right.
I mean, and that's kind of what materialism is saying. So if something exists, then it's in a material realm. And like to say that something is dual or outside of materialism, it just doesn't mean anything to me.
Well, I mean,
it's like a way of creating a category. It's you're creating a rug under which you can sweep the things that make you feel uncomfortable because there's not an explanation for it.
Right.
Instead of saying, well, this is part of the material world too. We just don't understand.
What I think is crazy is that, I just barely learned this sometime in the past year, probably, that I didn't realize what dark matter was.
Oh, you understand it now?
No, well, I didn't understand that nobody knows what dark matter is.
Yeah, and it's like 95%.
It's like 95% of everything. That's like, wait, you astrophysicists this whole time? You don't even know what 95% of this is?
Okay, here's my question. How do you determine that? 90, like if you're gonna say this is 95% and 5%, then that means that 100% of what it is, and we don't know the limit. Like whatever is on the other side of what we're able to perceive, we don't know how far that stretches, how deep that goes, to be able to put a percentage.
Yeah, what's 10% of everything?
Yeah. of infinite expansion, and we don't even know if it's infinitely expanding or not. There's no idea. So to put a number on dark matter at 95% when you really can't even put a number on these things, it's a guess, and it's the best guess that they have, and they've got their consensus on it, but it's still. That is amazing. But anyway, I derailed.
Dark matter is just like passing through us constantly.
Yeah,
that like it's just, and so like
that's
what
Satan
is that?
It's Satan and his angels. That's what it is, because the dark.
Whatever it is, maybe it's the upside down from Stranger
Oh
Things.
Yeah, Stranger Things. Yeah,
but I'm just saying, there's way more. Nobody should pretend that they know anything about what's going on. All I know is that I'm experiencing being this organism, and that this brain has more to offer this experience of life than just waking consciousness. It's like, it's like a guitar. Like, you don't just play one string of the guitar, you play it all together. And, or like an orchestra, sometimes it's good to have a violin solo, but
Yeah.
These are all parts of us. It's not an accident that these mystical experiences can be triggered and that they provide an enormous amount of benefit for people who experience them. And I just think it's something we've lost in the pursuit of scientific materialism. We don't like talking about things that are less tangible, like a spiritual experience, like a transcendent experience. And so I think those are things that have unfortunately been marginalized and kind of categorized as esoteric or new age, or that it's just something that is for primitive people and people who believe in magic. But I think it's something that's always been a part of us, and I think it potentially holds a lot of answers to the things that ail us in society. Like we were saying earlier, we built this modern civilization with all this technology and all this complexity. And is it really making us, really giving us access to happiness?
And we built this city on rock and roll.
Yeah.
We can't forget that either. I want to try to create, to articulate this image that I've been thinking about for a long time. And this can be where we end, because we've been going for an hour and a half now. But so if you picture like this very smooth pond that's just like glass on the surface, and you drop in a rock, and what you see, these ripples, there's these ripple effects, right? And that makes the design, and you can see that design, and you can see the impact of that rock on the surface of the water with all of these ripples. You take two rocks and drop them next to each other, and then you see the same kind of circular things, but then when the ripples hit each other, they make a different design. You add a third rock, you add a fourth rock, and you've got all of these ripples, and they're making this different design on top of the water. I kind of think of each person in this world as one of these rocks that's dropped onto the surface of a water, and whatever we do or whatever we don't do is making an impact, not only on the surface of that water with the ripples that we make, but on all the ripples that it encounters of people around us. And so there's this like constant dance and wiggling and design and these things. And I only bring this up to say to anybody who I might think, I don't have anything to contribute. I'm not adding anything to this great design of ripples on top of the surface of the water. Yes, you are. You, either through action,
can't help
or
it.
Inaction.
You are
through
You're
action
part of it.
or inaction. You are making a difference with that. And I say these things in the name of magic mushrooms, maybe, or something, or cannabis. It's
Amen to that.
I love the kind of visual thinking and meditating with this kind of stuff that comes from it. And yeah,
We didn't really talk much about the meaning of life, though.
Oh, what do you think we've been talking about this whole time, Micah?
Well, if I were to, if we're wrapping this up, if I were to actually answer that question, like what is the meaning of life, I would say that there is no objective meaning to anybody's life. It's not like there is a meaning that we can all share. Just because for the reasons that we've talked about, because our experience and our reality is all, there's these screens of consciousness that we're experiencing everything with. And so there is, in my opinion, no objective meaning to life, but there is obviously an enormous amount of subjective meaning. And so I think what people get hung up on is finding the objective truth.
Like the one single answer that fits all. Yeah.
I think the meaning of life is to find your meaning.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, and to live it and to be it. And, we don't know what happens once all the tissue's dead and the brain's dead. My opinion is that it's just lights out and it's over. in terms of you experiencing, in terms of me running the Micah program, that program is going to end and it's going to be over. And I don't know what happens to my consciousness after that. I don't really care. I'm banking on the fact that this is a limited thing that exists.
You're banking on the fact that this is a limited thing, that your existence as Micah Nickolaisen is finite.
That there's a shelf life on this, and that everything is going to run its course.
Yeah.
And so I just want to embrace that. And my big mantra that I've had for like the past year is just to be the river, because when you think of, like, I love the metaphor of a river because, the river, at any part of it, you can't say this is the river, or 3 miles up, this is the river. The answer is yes, this is all the river, and it just flows. The river, it meanders through the valleys, it cuts through the mountains, it dashes itself against the rocks, and it doesn't care. It just goes. It just flows. And I think that is what we're all supposed to do. And that sounds very like kind of new age Eckhart Tolle, but I think there's a lot of truth and wisdom to all of that.
Oh, I could get way more new age Eckhart Tolle. I could go way deeper than that.
But anyway, I don't even know what I'm really trying to ultimately express, other than that I don't know what the meaning of life is. I just know what the meaning of my life is.
Yeah.
And it's whatever I want it to be.
All right. I love it. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Did you like it? Did you like this conversation?
Yeah. I mean, I
went more than 10 minutes like you thought?
Well, I mean, that last part is what, when I said that'll be a short conversation, because what I just said in the past few minutes is really all I can really say to express that. But, yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed the conversation. I don't know what anybody other than you and me is going to think about it, but I hope it's beneficial.
No,
hope it's at least interesting.
the feedback that I've been getting, especially from the Patreon subscribers to Infants on Thrones, are getting more like chatty with each other. So we're like giving each other more feedback, which is really nice. I'm hearing good things, like, and I hope nobody feels like they're trying to be converted to a certain way, but it's like you're giving me things to think about that I hadn't thought before. And I'm enjoying the process of struggling with these new ideas and trying to figure out what it means for me. And so for you to end what you're saying is like, the meaning of life is just for me to find out what meaning of life is for me. And I think I've got it. I think that's everybody's, you find your way in the world.
I mean,
find something
I know what it means right now,
Yeah.
and that's really all that matters.
And like you said at the beginning of this, like what you're saying right now is a reflection of how you feel today, and it could change.
Right. Exactly.
Perfect, because that's what the river does. It's going through the canyon.
I guess at the end of the day, to kind of go back to what prompted all this, what do people do when are just kind of in a wasteland of values and meaning and purpose in life? And, I have definitely been there, and I know what that's like. I know the existential pain that someone goes through when they're extricating themselves from a fundamentalist religious perspective like that, and community.
It's more the community even than
right.
Like that. Yeah. Those are just like the bells and whistles and trappings that this community is so like insanely white knuckle holding on to that. Yeah. Anyway, go ahead. I derailed you.
Oh no, you're fine. And all I can share is just what's worked for me.
Yeah.
Because I do feel like I'm on the other side of all that now, many years later. And so as I look back on especially the past 3 years of my life, I can attribute, like I used to weigh 345 pounds.
That's insane.
And I used to be miserable and depressed and full of angst and cynicism, and these transcendent mystical experiences were the portal that showed me how I could become well.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I'm there. When I say I'm on the other side, of it. I mean, I'm on the other side of that specific, kind of existential pain that leaving the church had.
But you're close
I still have
lost
so
100
much
pounds though, right? You're getting close to 100 pounds.
Yeah, no, I've done it.
You look great.
Thanks. I feel like even before the faith crisis, this is the best I've ever been ever right now. And I'm so incredibly grateful for it because I know what the opposite of that feels like. And I never want to be in that place again.
Right.
But I can attribute that to these transcendent experiences that I've had and what I've learned and the lessons and the things that I've been shown in those weird psychedelic realms. And for me, my tool to reach those mystical experiences has been plants.
Yeah.
But
and I think the church does a very good job of creating this sense of community with very rigid boundaries, this cultural membrane around Mormonism that when you've got curious individuals that are poking at that membrane and seeing, is there something on the other side of it? And you break out of it and you go, oh yeah, there is. And actually, maybe there's no boundaries. You haven't really learned how to exist in a world without those boundaries. And so you've got to kind of create them for yourselves. And that is a hard, scary, uncertain thing to do.
I mean, just not having manuals anymore was scary.
Yeah, seriously.
There's no manual for this. What do I do?
or feeling like you can kneel down in prayer and get an answer to,
I know.
What job should I take? What should I do with my life? All of these really important questions that you used to feel like, well, the Holy Ghost will tell me. And then you're like, oh, wait a second. All of this stuff was based on a lie. So maybe there is no Holy Ghost. Wait, I'm alone? I'm alone. How do I do this? Without realizing you've been doing it alone the whole time. You were just being told that it wasn't. And so you've been under this illusion of boundaries and the illusions of a membrane that now you've woken up to this reality as, oh, wait, actually, I'm responsible for my life. I make these choices all by myself. I can't, ascribe this to somebody else or pass the buck to this person over here. And
if all you've done is paint by numbers your whole life, the idea of an open canvas
exactly
can be
great
horrifying.
Analogy. Yes. Yeah.
And
and messy,
but then
you're gonna
but once you get over that,
you're gonna look like shit.
That it's whatever you want it to be.
It takes practice.
Yeah.
Muscle memory, developing new things.
And
and we've got it all figured out, don't we, Micah?
I don't have shit.
We've got it all figured out. We're great. Everybody needs to get to where we are, huh? Yeah, no, I don't think either one of us feels like that. So,
but yeah, I just, and it really is a good analogy. I love going to art museums and especially abstract art, which I had no idea to really understand until the past few years. Mm-hmm. But it's just whatever you want that canvas to be. And if the canvas gets too messy and it's too dirty and it's just not what you want to be, just take some mushrooms and you just wipe the canvas off.
I don't know. I think the mushrooms kind of create a design of their own.
Right. Yeah. So,
all right, man.
Anyway,
I'm gonna jump off.
This little conversation.
Cool. Yeah. Nice. Yeah, and let's get together for a beer again. That was nice.
Absolutely. Sounds wonderful.
Cool.
All right, have a good night.
Thank you, man. Yeah.
Hi, this is Hillary.
Matthew, Ryan,
Carol,
Keith,
Ashley, and I like to play bingo online while listening to Infants on Thrones.
You can comment on this episode on the website, infantsonthrones.com.
If you really like what you hear, give the Quorum a 5-star rating and write a short review on iTunes.
I did. Anyone for the closing prayer?
Thank you for listening to Infants on Thrones.